So sometimes people think like, okay, I'm moving to Tacoma, but what they really mean is like, I'm moving to the greater Tacoma area,
Sure.
right? They might not be sure yet where they're going to live. So what are the differences in price across Pierce County? Like, what's the median price for Pierce County right now in 2024?
Generally low 500s with lots of in between. So if affordability is the prime concern, then I would focus on maybe like the south end or the east side of Tacoma proper, the actual city. But that being said, there's still a ton of starter homes, like in Spanaway, for example, that are in equivalent price territory. It's just you have a bit of a longer commute. Or if you work on the base, then you have a shorter commute. It just depends on your goals.
So basically that whole thing of like drive till you can afford to buy, like that's a thing in Pierce County as well. Like oftentimes if you go further out, places like Spanaway, Frederickson, Graham, you're going to see more
the
affordability. Key Peninsula is a great, So that's an example of like across the bridge from Tacoma over the Narrows Bridge is Gig Harbor, which is one of the most expensive areas of Pierce County, right?
Certainly.
Some of the most expensive neighborhoods, lots of saltwater views, lots of saltwater access.
Yeah.
But if you push a little bit past Gig Harbor, you get Olalla, Port Orchard, Key Peninsula, and things do start to get more affordable, right?
Oh, Port Orchard is extremely affordable, although maybe not for long. Port Orchard, price-wise, is kind of like what Tacoma was 10 years ago. A lot of people are excited by that affordable price point and the foot ferry to Seattle. So I see the affordability there maybe not being so much.
If somebody says, I'm moving to Tacoma and I'm going to have a commute to Seattle and I have to be under 700,000, where does your brain go?
Well, I mean, if it's just price, it could be anywhere, right? I mean, you'll get a decent North End house for 700. I mean, under 700 certainly, but it just depends. Do you want something with a more urban type of environment like the Proctor District where you can walk to the farmer's market? Do you care more about, well, you won't see water at that price, but do you care more about being close to amenities, perhaps near the water? What do you care about besides just commuting and just creature comforts? I mean, it really depends on the whole picture. I mean, every buyer is unique.
I would think like another question to ask would be like era of home built.
Sure.
Because a lot of times if folks are coming from places like, Texas where they have, massive housing developments where they're used to living in newer things, like we don't have a ton of neighborhoods like that. But Northeast Tacoma has some developments that have been built out since the 90s and 2000s,
or even in the West End,
right?
Even in areas that were just built out more mid-century to 70s, 80s, you have larger lot sizes as you go west of Orchard Street, for example. So it really just depends on everything from vintage to just what makes the best sense for your own situation. And no two buyers are the same.
Yeah, so in general, would you say for people in that under 700 range, are they looking at multiple offers if they're making offers on homes?
Generally, yes. There's a real bifurcation in Tacoma proper, I'm noticing. So in the North End itself, if you're under $1 million, it's probably going to be fairly competitive in the form of shorter time on market, like under 2 weeks, multiple offers. We've seen multiple offers on $900,000 homes before.
Yeah.
North of $1 million, it's a little different. The market is cooler. There's just longer exposure time, and if not a buyer's market, just more of a balanced market, perhaps.
Right.
But the North End just has had greater price stability. We actually saw modest price appreciation in the North End, despite the high mortgage rate environment, despite high inflation. Whereas what
you mean is when the rates went up, what we saw was things flattening out or maybe dipping a little bit in some neighborhoods.
In some, but not others. So the North End, we did not see a dip. We saw modest, and by modest I mean maybe 2% or so appreciation, whereas we actually saw a little bit of cooling in other neighborhoods like Central Tacoma, Hilltop, the South End. And my personal theory on that is that it's all about rate sensitivity. Whereas the predominant buyer pool in the South End, for example, or South Tacoma or McKinley Hill, where have you, is primarily a group of first-time buyers, and that's where rate sensitivity is the strongest because generally they don't have assets beyond their down payment. And buying a $400,000 house at a 3% COVID rate, it's a very different proposition compared
COVID rate.
A COVID rate, yes. Yes, we have been vaccinated against those rates.
Oh, man.
Dad joke.
Oh, man.
So, but now buying that same house at a 7% mortgage, it's either just untenable for people's situations or they just flat out cannot get financing. And so that buyer pool got really hollowed out. So it's a real inversion from what we're used to as real estate professionals because we're used to the comparatively affordable markets being these really hot and popping markets.
Yeah,
and,
it's true.
And that being a step-up buyer, going to a more expensive marketplace usually is advantageous because you have equity and you can have a great sale and maybe a more forgiving purchase. But at least within the city limits, it's on its head. The people who are buying in the North End, for example, have a little bit more of a competitive situation they have to deal with, and people can sell in the Lincoln District or Larchmont or Fern Hill or McKinley Hill or wherever, but generally you're dealing with somewhat longer marketing times, conditions that buyers are requesting, like 2-1 buy downs and other seller-paid credits are more common, not because buyers are just more aggressive, but because they just need it to make the loan work.
So right now, if you're in that under 700 and really under 500, right? You're trying to get into your first house. You are maybe in a better position right now. You might get some seller concessions. You might get a little help buying down your rate. You might get some closing costs. But also, like, the minute those rates do start to ease up, whenever that'll be,
then you have to start bidding the price up $10,000 or $12,000
because you're going to have more people that can afford to get in. Like, we have this backlog of people that are shut out by the rates, right?
Yeah, and if you think making monthly payments on a 7% mortgage is ugly, try doing that with a 6.75% mortgage, but having to pay $20,000 more to get the house.
Right. So this is the calculation that people are making who are buying right now. They're like, okay, when the rates ease up, the prices are going to go up, so I'm going to lock in at the current rate and hope I can refinance in the future. So it's 2024, you're moving to Tacoma. What is like the key takeaway people need to understand about pricing and price appreciation like right now?
Clarity and a reality check.
Yeah.
So what that means is being super, super clear about your goals and working with the professional, not just on the realty side, but talking with a trusted lender to make sure your financing is tied up. And what I mean by a reality check is just being really clear about what your budget actually gets you. So many people just look at fantasy, on their favorite real estate
I've been
app
guilty of that.
Sure, we all do that, right? But actually having those hard conversations on the front end about what am I comfortable with, what kind of home, what kind of neighborhood does that get me,
Right.
and then just being realistic on the front end so that you can put your feelings on the back burner and actually be strategic.
Well, and so often I talk to people who are like, oh, I'm not quite ready to talk to a realtor yet because it's February and we're not moving to Tacoma till September. And I'm always like, oh no, your realtor wants to talk to you now. Your lender wants to talk to you now. They want to get you set up so that you're not accidentally finding a house before you've got everything ready, right? That's the thing.
Absolutely.
You don't mind talking to people 6 months before they're ready to buy.
I recently closed someone that I had been talking to and working with for 4 years. I've helped people list and close, and Matt, you remember that one Proctor house a couple of years ago. They had 3 dogs. They had to move to Colorado. We had to get that thing ready in 2 weeks. So we can do blazing fast. I had a former Special Forces guy who it was a 4-year process. So I'm really agnostic to time, as is my team. It's more just about what's right for you, your situation, and just what best prepares you.
That's awesome. Thanks for helping us understand what the Tacoma real estate market is like in 2024. And the key takeaway I'm getting is that it's a great time to move to Tacoma.
It's always a great time to move here.
It's true.
Move to Tacoma.com.
Check out our neighborhood guide at movetotacoma.com. We have dozens and dozens of neighborhoods in Tacoma and across Pierce County, along with information about the median home price, the type of architecture, the resources in the community, what the neighbors are saying about living there, as well as activities that you can do. In addition, we have blog posts and podcasts that cover information about the neighborhoods as well. So if you're trying to narrow things down based on more than just your house and your budget, the neighborhood guide is a great place to start.